Two coins. In a drawer are two coins. They look the same, but one coin produces heads 90% of the time when spun, while the other produces heads only 30% of the time. You select one of the coins. You are allowed to spin it once, and then must decide whether the coin is the 90% or the 30% head coin. Your null hypothesis is that your coin produces 90% heads. So our null hypothesis is that we have coin 1, which is 90% heads. Meaning our alternative hypothesis is that we have coin 2, which produces 30% heads. Those are our only possibilities here when we have two coins in the drawer. So that is part A. Part A is that we have the other coin. B asks, given that the outcome of your spin is tails, what would you decide? What if it were heads? So if we spun tails, we would conclude that we have coin 2. So we would reject the null. If we spin heads, we would conclude that we have coin 1, which means we did not reject the null. Part C, how large is alpha in this case? Alpha is the probability of making a type 1 error or probability of rejecting the null when we shouldn't have. So in this case, we reject the null if we spin tails. So alpha is the probability of rejecting the null when null is true. So even if the coin is, we do have coin 1, which means it spins 90% heads, that means 10% of the time it's going to spin tails, and whenever it spins tails, we reject the null. So in this case, our alpha is 10%. This is even if we have coin 1, we get tails 10% of the time. How large is the power of this test? How many possibilities are in the alternative hypothesis? So the power is the probability of correctly rejecting the null when the null is false. Okay? So in the so we're going to reject the null whenever we spin tails. And under the alternative, if we actually have coin 2, how often do we spin tails? We spin tails 70% of the time. We spin heads 30% of the time, which means we get tails 70% of the time. Over here we get tails 10% of the time. So in this case, we would correctly reject the null hypothesis 70% of the time, because coin 2 is going to give us 70% heads. 70% is our power. Finally, how could you lower the probability of a type 1 error and increase the power at the same time? Lower type 1 and increase power. The easiest way would be to just do more spins. Spin the coin more often. Okay, if you spin the coin often or many times, then you will be more certain about whether you have coin 1 or coin 2.